Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator here at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you another art demonstration in partnership with the DuPage Art League. Please be advised that the artistic content contains tasteful depictions of nudity. Since this program is being recorded, we want to remind viewers that it is intended for adults and may not be appropriate for children. Founded over 60 years ago, the DuPage Art League is dedicated to promoting and encouraging the visual arts through classes, workshops, gallery exhibits, and public programs such as this one. We are grateful to the DuPage Art League for arranging tonight's demonstration by acclaimed artist Joan Bredendick. Joan uses watercolor paint without preconceptions of what watercolor should look like. To her, paint is paint, allowing Joan to take a non-traditional approach. Relying on the transparent nature of watercolor, Joan uses multi-layered glazes to achieve depth of color, often creating texture by incising into the surface of the paper. Viewers are drawn into her paintings with strong compositional design, narrative, movement, and unexpected elements. So thank you so much for being with us tonight, Joan.
Thank you, Barry.
There we go.
Well, good evening. I want to say thank you, first of all, to the DuPage Art League and Dan Danielson for recommending me to come and do a demonstration for the DuPage Art League, and also to the Wheaton Public Library for hosting this event. I'm going to start out tonight by talking about a watercolor that I brought here, and also there's a PowerPoint of some slides gives you a little bit of a history of where I was, the process of going through the paintings over the years, and then where I am today with the demonstration. I did want to tell you a little bit, just mention my mentor in school. He passed away a few years ago, but his name was Win Jones. I don't know if any of you know him. He was an exceptional watercolor painter, but he was also an amazing teacher on the college level. Because a lot of times in college, your professors don't teach you a lot. They come in and they, say, oh, keep the reds moving, or, well, that corner isn't stapled correctly, and then they leave. And Win really taught. And I taught college art for 25 years, and I patterned my teaching style after Win. And so I felt during my career that I really taught my students. When I was first a student with Win, I was not a student that showed an especially high level of promise. He was a landscape painter, and so you do what your teacher does when you're learning, not necessarily where your heart is. And so I would try to do landscapes and mix browns and greens and, yellows and blues. And, if you mix all those colors as a watercolor painter, what do you get? Mud. And so my paintings were mud, and Win would literally come up behind me, and he'd walk up behind me and he'd go, like that, like Lurch on the Addams Family. And then walk away, and you're this young person looking up at this professor who's groaning over what you're doing. So then how I happened to sort of get an idea about watercolors, I figured that all these colors made mud, so maybe I could pick two colors that when they ran into each other, they made another color. And that'll be the first slide that we're going to show, Barry, will be the one of my first paintings. Maybe we should show that, and then I'll talk about this painting in a little while. Would that be okay? Yeah. So when I started to mix blue and red, what do you get? You get purple. And so I stopped trying to splash the paint around like he did. And I just started with something very simple. This is a mother and child. Was in art history looking a lot of Mary Cassatt work with mother and children. And it worked because, you know, if the blue ran into the red, you got purple. If the red ran into the blue, you got purple. And so, and by doing something very simple with the shapes, the painting just sort of started to evolve. So this was one of my very first paintings that I did with Wynn, and he didn't groan anymore. He maybe thought that I had a little promise. And he was my teacher all the way through school at Northern for getting an MA and an MFA in painting. And when I was at Northern, this is really cool. It was, well, back in the 1900s. and there was only painting, and that was on the fourth floor because that was closest to God. And then the next floor was design, and the next floor was art education, and the basement was pottery. Of course, so that was the hierarchy at the university. So because I did watercolor, and because I just exclusively painted in watercolor, I got to do my MA and my MFA show in watercolor. And that was kind of a big deal back then, you know, because usually you had oil painter or acrylic painter paint for your show. So I kind of broke a little bit of a barrier there with Wynn's help. So next, this is going to be a chronological history of what the paintings have looked like subject matter. And so I practiced a lot. I practiced a lot and started to do, you know, you're in figure drawing class. So I'd take the drawings from figure drawing class and then simplify, because I could control the pieces, the paint that way. And then started to kind of abstract those shapes just a little bit and simplify. And this was kind of another cool thing. So in art school, when you are painting, they're always talking about creating, I was a college teacher, so if I'm being kind of a wise guy about it, I'm doing that to myself too. Talked about establishing a relationship between the figure and the ground. So that meant your image and your background. Well, I never knew what to do with the backgrounds. Who knows what to do with the backgrounds? So I just blew them up and made them real big. The figures filled up the whole page. And then, you know, had these little tiny shapes there. And the professor would come in and say, well, you know, you have a very good intimate relationship between that figure and the ground. And I'd be like, yes, I do. So you're kind of in survival mode a lot of the time when you're getting through trying to work with different personalities. Okay, next, please. Okay, so what I started to do then with the shapes was break down the figure into these shapes. And of course, all this time you're studying art history. And so you're seeing all kinds of contemporary work. And what I started to do is I was interested in kind of enclosing the figures. So I put them in paper bags, brown bags, and I would put the bag out and, you know, recognize that little half circle with the little red. They used to have that on the bags. Does any of that look familiar? And then this is when I started using stencils. I would cut the figure up, and these are stencils that I would make from my drawings. So they're my stencils, they're not purchased stencils. And put the arm a certain way with the stencil, and then just draw it all on the paper. Yes. You have to be mic'd, I think, for the question.
Yeah, just a moment.
Could you restate what you said about paper bag?
Oh, when I started, I did quite a few paintings where I was having the female figure kind of in a paper bag in my mind. And so on the paper bags, the way they used in the 1900s, they used to have a little red, they used to have a half circle and a little red dots around the paper bags. Yeah, yeah. And so that's where I got that idea. And so I put that in the figure or in the bags. And then, so it's very abstract. And then they got to be not so abstract as time went by, but this was the first time I used stencils. So I would draw the figure on poster board, then I'd cut them out, and then I just squish them on. And I'm not sure exactly where her body is, somewhere in there probably. But if you look at her arm, you know, nobody's arm can go like that. It can't. But that was just the fun of the expression of the figure. So next, please. Okay, so you'll see a lot of these poses of the figure are very similar. So as time went by, and this is years and years of painting and subjects changing. So this is when I started to do the fish. There was I'm not going to be graphic about it. There was a very dramatic moment in my house between me, the fish in my aquarium, and murder. The fish were eating the other fish, and because fish are fish. And so I just decided that I was not a successful aquarium person. So I decided to paint them and went out of the aquarium business and started to paint the fish. So, and I thought, what about painting mermaids? And it seemed so trite, but what if I could make mermaids not be trite? And so hence the mermaid in the water with the sea anemone and the fish. Now this is again when I use stencils, and I'll show you some tonight, but I would draw a stencil of on poster board, draw a fish, and then use that fish to just lay it and repeat it. And again, these were stencils that I draw myself and then use them because it's so much easier than drawing all those individual fish, because all the fish, they're fish. They basically look the same, and then you can do designs on the inside. This is exactly how I do the koi painting that you'll see here with the stencils. And I brought a few tonight to show you. Then I started to play around with liquid frisket, which you'll also see how I use that. And liquid frisket is a water repellent gum. It comes in a little jar. It's very temperamental. When you put it on the painting, it dries, and then you let it dry on the white paper, and then paint your painting. And at the very end, you rub the frisket off, and that's how I got the splashing. Because could you imagine trying to paint around all that splashing? And so that's sort of how that happened. And I think that, and so the pattern in the mermaid's tail, that is just a very extreme exaggeration of fish scales. You know, I wasn't really interested in making her tail look like really accurately painted fish scales. And then if you look at this painting, you have to look for a long time. Her tail is way over there. And then there's a sea turtle, and that's the first time I used the sea turtle. In my paintings, oftentimes there will be a little menacing element, not in the koi, but in paintings that I've done since, many of them. So if you look at the claws on the sea turtle, they're pretty exaggerated. So, you know, it's like life. You know, we're going along, everything's okay, but there's a little menace out there. And so I add that into my paintings. Oftentimes they'll be just for a little provocative element. Okay, next, please. Okay. And then this is, if you look at the figure, these are the same figures, very similar. I did a series of paintings where I put the figure in seashells. I had gone to Florida and I got this huge green snail shell. And it was very interesting to me. So I started to close up the figures inside these shells. The paintings, if they feel a little claustrophobic sometimes, that's because that's part of the thing that I'm trying to do. So I just wrapped up the figure. I do that a lot of times and put her in the shell. And so this was green snail shell woman, and there were a series of these too. All of these examples that you're seeing represent series of paintings that I did, maybe 10 of each transition that I made. Yes, you need to be mic'd, please.
Yeah, just a moment.
Yeah. Or not mic'd, microphone.
So the legs and the arms, are those the same cutouts from the other one?
Mhm,
So that's when you're saying you're repeating, you're
Mhm.
using the same.
mhm. Yes.
Got it. Yeah,
It,
interesting.
it's not any different than someone painting landscape and going out and painting barns, or flowers or whatever, oceans. You're painting the same theme, something you're obsessed with and love. It's just I approach them in a different way, because that's why I called the program a non-traditional approach to watercolor, because these are very watercolor feeling. They have the glow of watercolor that you can't really get with any other medium, in my opinion. But the glow of the paint comes through, but they're not done in the spontaneous way that a lot of watercolor painters paint. So they're different. And that's the style that I evolved over time, which I'm going to be painting and showing you. Yes.
So when you mentioned the stencil, is that to get the same shape each
Yes,
time?
and to maybe put the legs and arms in a different way.
Okay. And do you trace them?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I trace them. So I make the stencils. I've got a whole pile like this over the years, very large amount. And I just pick them out and I just stick them on the paper and look at it. And then I do an underpainting real pale and step back and make sure that it can make sense. I've even gotten halfway through a painting and realized the hand's on the wrong way. It's from using the stencil. So I'm much better at that now. I don't make those kinds of mistakes, but I've made that mistake too. You got to get the feet on the right way and the hands on the right way, because I can't go that far in the exaggeration. Okay, next, please. Oh, okay, this is one of my favorite paintings. And this has to do with, this is rabbits. And she has a rather shocked look on her face, I think. Like she just realized that maybe it's not a really good idea to have these giant rabbits who happen to have long teeth crawling all over you. And this was a 40 by 60 inch painting. And don't worry about my mind. It just happens to go to these places. I use my cats to pose for the rabbits, because cats are real similar in their body to rabbits, and they do the same kinds of things that rabbits do. And so I made the rabbits have these really long ears that actually turn into ribbons, because ribbons are another theme in my work. So the ears turned into rabbits, and then are these, oh, there's the teeth. These are the little tiny teeth. So this is a real thing. I didn't make this up. I was at the Walker up in Minneapolis and going through the art galleries, and there was a basket carved in like walnut or something. It was beautiful. And it had these ivory inserts of rabbits with these like tusks almost. Well, I never forgot it. And so the thing that I love about the rabbits, because I did quite a few of these, is that people walk up, oh, they're rabbits with teeth. And then the teeth, this is only, I think this was the first one. The teeth are real little, but as I did more and more, the teeth got more dramatic. So that was fun too. And that's one of the themes in my work, is that everything looks one way, but is it really the way that you're seeing it? Is that really what's going on? could there be a little menace? Which there usually is in life. Okay, thank you. Next, please. And then this is a series of paintings that I call my pain and suffering paintings. And these I'm still using stencils. But I became fascinated with caribou antlers because that's that enclosing theme again, enclosing the female figure in something. And so those are actually caribou antlers. They don't show as dramatically in this particular one, and kind of turned upside down. And I was going through a real hard time in my life. And I realized that those are men's ties that are tying her up. And that's all I'm going to say. And the ties are kind of surrounding her and tying her up. And it was at this point that I realized that I could take that painting and turn it another way, and it worked the other way too. I liked the upside down approach to how she looks, but the paintings can sometimes be turned a different way. And so if you see her face here, and then there's her arm, her hand and her arm, and then her feet are up there. Okay, Barry, thank you. Next, please. Okay, and this is called In the Antler Chair, and those are the caribou antlers. Caribou antlers, it was on the cover of Time. There was a caribou on the cover of Time, I don't remember, and the antlers, they look like human hands. And so it's called In the Antler Chair, and the chair is holding her in, but and all the ribbons are holding her in, because that's a way to break up the female figure. And in the background, there's like an ocean and a sunrise, and all she'd have to do is get up and walk out of that chair, but she doesn't. She just stays there. So a lot of times in life, you get in a situation where you're caught or captured and you can't get out of the situation. And that was what I was trying to portray in this. Whether or not you get that from this, you'll bring your own interpretation to it, which I think is the most important thing. I don't like to particularly write artist statements, or I'm just trying to give you some kind of basic themes that I see in my work. Okay, next, Barry, please. And this is the starting of the fish paintings. So let's see. The koi paintings, I told you about the frustration with having fish by my, trying to have aquariums. When you go to like a Japanese restaurant, you see the koi and they're so beautiful. Well, it's because you're seeing them from the top. You don't really want to see them on eye level because they are so creepy. And especially if you have food up at Anderson's Garden in Rockford, they come after you. I know, exactly. So, but if you paint them like this, they'll see its life. Come after you. If you paint them like this from above, they are so beautiful. And it makes for a lot of dynamic movement in terms of the painting. And again, these are stencils, and I'll show you, I brought some of the koi stencils with me. And I have several stencils that I've drawn out the koi fish, and then I just lay them on. And these are the most spontaneous paintings I do because I don't really do a lot of sketches. I usually tend to go from dark to light, dark at the top to light at the bottom, and just play with them. And then the vines and then the bubbles again are the liquid frisket. And so they're kind of happy paintings. People respond to these probably the most out of the paintings that I do, although the cats, people really like the cats too. So next, Barry. Oh, and speaking of cats, so this is a little menacing koi. This was there's the cat, do you see her up there? She's only got, does she have? I think she's only got one. Oh, she does have the claws out on the back, but is that to have purchase on the edge of the pool? She's not really fishing with those claws. So it's maybe a happy relationship with the cats. I'm not sure. But I started to put cats in with the koi. My husband's really annoying. He's an artist. And he came he came into this. This is what I put up with. So he came in and I'm drawing the cat. And he says, Joan, that cat cannot possibly stand that way and be on the edge of the pond. And I'm like, well, fine, draw the cat. So he drew the cat perfectly, how the cat was supposed. He doesn't look at a cat, he just draws this perfect cat. And this is the cat that he drew. And he was right. So she looks so much better. Because I had a cat like this, and he said, Joan, she just can't stand that way. And so that, pardon? The cat, there's her face. And this is a little crop because it actually goes up with her tail, but there's her face and her paw, her ears, and her leg and it actually goes up and her tail is up there in the vines that are going over, the ferns. So, and again, this is with stencils. And another theme that I like to do is this orange or red line that will be in a lot of my paintings. I think of it as kind of a life and energy force within the paintings. Is that the last one, Barry? The two more? Wow. Oh, okay. And so I'm doing the figurative things at the same time that I'm doing the koi and then the cat. And now I do them kind of all together, as well as some color pencil exploration and playing around with some acrylic paint these days. So this is the first painting that I did after a long hiatus from painting, and it's called Knitting Off the Lamb. And I was a voracious knitter for many, many years. It's a madness. If any of you are knitters, you know. So I knit and knit and knit, and I kind of became obsessed with the whole learning about lambs and all that. And I thought one day, what would it be like if you could knit right off the lamb? Like it would magically be spun. Yeah, you wouldn't have to, because someone that I know always was trying to get me to spin. I don't have enough time left to spin yarn. So that's how that series started. And a series of paintings with figures and the lambs. And you'll see in one of the demos that I'm doing some of the fern work. And there's that red line again. You'll see that a lot coming up. Okay, and last one. Oh, and this is again the lamb. The figurative, the figure, I exaggerate the female figure. I'm not using stencils anymore. I'm drawing the whole thing. I'm obsessed with this line on, like if you took this line, it's kind of like Ang, classical painter, and you take that line and you just continue it to infinity. It's called continuity in design. And so how far can you stretch that line in the shoulder for expression? Because I know how to draw a neck right, and I know how to draw a face correctly, and I know how to set eyes in a face, but I choose not to, because it's for expression. It's like Picasso, and I'm not comparing myself to Picasso in any way, but Picasso was an old master when he was young. He could do everything correctly, and then he spent the rest of his career not doing it correctly. And so, but you've got, I think you have to know how to do it the right way before you can change it. And so you'll see in the two demos that I brought today, paintings to demo, similarities. And I put them in chairs, and I just make the chairs up, and then the vines. And this was a 40 by 60 painting too. It was really large. And I make the faces up. Okay, and this is this the actual painting I brought tonight? It might be. I borrowed a demo painting. Yeah, I think it is. Last one. This was as loose as I could possibly be because I'm a very tight painter. Starting to, again, the cat is made out of a stencil that I drew. And then I would do this gridding in the back, and then I just mess up the surface with a knitting needle. All this scratching in is done with a knitting needle. Of course, well, there's a little of the knitting. And then, and I'll show you this tonight, all this in the background, the texture, that's from wallpaper in my house that I rubbed on and made the textural rubbing. And I'll show you this tonight if I ever stop talking and start painting. So, and I actually have this painting with me tonight so you can see it. I didn't realize that. That's just a happy accident. Are there any questions? Have any questions? It's time to give the microphone.
Someone did ask if you can give an approximate size of most of your pieces.
Okay, they're usually large. 22 by 30, which are the ones that I have to demonstrate. That's the size of a sheet of watercolor paper, handmade paper. I use 140-pound cold press paper, individual sheets, although I do have a roll for these larger pieces. And this is 52 by, I think, 24. So I use that long format. And then I work with a half sheet, hardly ever a quarter sheet. I like to paint large.
And there was one more question from our virtual audience at this point. How many glazes do you usually do?
Many. And you'll see that tonight. So I start them out, I local color the initial, so then I can stand back and see that's like where you have a color that defines an area. So I'll use a pink on the skin, and I'll use a pale green on the foliage, and blue for water, or brown for a chair. But then I start to, build up the layers, and it maybe be like six layers from that initial local color to see, and then to just build it up, which I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to do a face, finish a face off, and do some skin with a really, really dark shadow in it. Yeah.
Just a moment.
Oh, gotta mic her up.
Hi, Joan.
Hi,
Can you tell us
Jessica.
more about how you make your templates or your stencils that you do?
I use poster board and just draw them, just draw a leg the way I think a leg should look, and then cut it out, and then trace around it when I'm putting them together. And I have some of the little koi stencils here. There's just a lot of fun, as an artist, they're always, whoever they are, people always want to loosen up and be more spontaneous, and I'm just not that person. So some of these things that I've done have been my attempts to be loose, so to speak. So I think it's all valid personally. I don't think that one way of painting, especially in today's world, one way of painting is better than another painting. You have to remember that when the Impressionists, they came in after Romanticism, and their work was called filth. A critic looked at the Impressionist work and called it filth. And what do people love today? Probably more than any other style of working, the general public, is we love Impressionism. This so speaks to you. So you have to think about that when you're judging artwork. Probably just, it's a time when I think every way of approaching artwork is good. Just go on Instagram and just see the variety of things that people are doing. It's a wonderful time.
All right. Well, you're welcome to go ahead over to your workspace.
All right, thank you. Okay. So I put my phone away for time. I don't want to, because that took a while. I didn't realize I gave you that many. So I wanted to show you quickly some sketchbooks. Well, I brought this one so you see how well it was used. It's literally falling apart because from time to time I still do get in it to mess around with it. And you'll see here, this was a commission, which I don't do anymore because they're nightmares.
Joan, can you bring that a little bit closer to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because no matter how hard you try, no matter how many meetings you have with the person, a lot of times things don't go right. So this was a underwater commission that went right. But the person and I, we went to the aquarium in Chicago. There's even the ticket stub. And I wrote, there's the ticket stubs. And I wrote down everything she liked in the aquarium. It's a 40 by 60 inch painting, watercolor. And I wrote down everything that she liked. And then these were sketches that I did. And my sketches in my sketchbook are not beautiful drawings. They're a way to record ideas. And so all of this work went into the sketchbook, the sketches for the commission. It did turn out, she was a friend, and she was still a friend at the end of this. But I probably took things to her house maybe 8 times, just to, at least, just to make sure that she got what she wanted. And so sketchbooks to me are really important, even though I'm a watercolor painter. You know, some watercolor painters just like plein air paint and take photographs, etc. I work from my sketchbooks all the time. And it's also a way to record your thoughts and your ideas. I journal in the sketchbooks. I watched Hamlet one night and wrote all the sayings from Hamlet that are popular in our culture. So that's what I do with these sketchbooks. And you're welcome at the end of this to come up and look at these, because there's nothing in my sketchbooks that I can't share with you. And if there is, well, that's okay too. So if you see something, it's okay. Who knows? So those are my sketchbooks, and I think that's very, very important for me and my process. And I also write titles down of, now wait, I'm going fast here, I know. You can't see. I write titles of possible titles for paintings and criticize my own sketches. So heavy-handed. And then this was the sketch that I did for the painting that I'm going to work on today. Any questions about any of that? No, how many of you use sketchbooks? Yeah, good, good. I think they're important. Some of the most beautiful works artists have ever done are in their sketchbooks when they leave them. So I brought a few stencils just to show you that this is how, I don't know what kind of paper this is, but these are, I just brought koi. So when I did that painting, I took a bunch of these. Why am I holding them up here? Like I'm teaching. I just draw them. And then if you just draw the body, then you can flip the tails any way you want to. So they don't have to look just like this. So you turn them this way and you do the tails this way, and you turn them that way and you do the tails another way. So those are the stencils that I use, you know, because I'm trying to be spontaneous. And then as far as my process goes, oh, there's the clock. Okay. I have a pile of tracing paper at my house and a pile with drawings, because it's kind of like the stencils and the figurative things. I'm a little bit of a lazy drawer, And I like to, I'm trying to find one to put here to show you. If you can see them, I like to work things out ahead of time on this piece of tracing paper. So if this is the painting, and you've got the very white paper, I think in watercolor, you want to keep your paper as pristine and white as possible, whether you paint loose or tightly, because you want that white to show through the paint. So instead of just drawing on here and erasing and erasing and erasing, I put a piece of, I stretch my paper, 140-pound paper, soak it in a tray, 20 minutes, pull it out, lay it on the board, let it dry until the shine goes off the page. Then I staple it down. Tape is not enough, so I staple it. It's a meditative thing when I take the staples out, because it takes a little bit of time. And then then I put a piece of tracing paper on it, a brand new fresh piece of tracing paper. And I do all my drawing on the tracing paper. So this was the first one that I did with this painting, and I had her in a chair like this, and I was going to do stripes, and I didn't like it. So I did it again, because remember, I like to knit, so I have a gift. I can do incredibly boring things for incredibly long periods of time. It is a gift, really, because some people can't do that, and I can do that. So I drew her again and took from another painting, changed the chair, oops, took from another painting, which I brought tonight too, and I opened up the background, put a different chair in, and put lambs in the back. And this is a painting where she's holding a lamb, but I never finished this painting because I didn't like the face. And so I put the lambs in the background. And then when I got a tracing that I was happy with, then I do it the old-fashioned way. I just color on the back with an ebony pencil, tape everything down with the blue tape, and then tape, and then transfer it. Just like you did when you were a kid, transfer things, right? So that's how the tracing paper comes in hand. So then when I'm done and ready to paint, I have a very, very pristine surface to paint on.
Joan, if you don't mind the interruption, there's just a couple questions. We'll get to the one
Sure.
in person as well. Someone asks, does soaking the paper for that long dissolve the sizing in the paper?
I think it probably does, but it doesn't seem to be a problem for me. It probably softens it. I don't think it would completely dissolve it.
And can you repeat why you're soaking it?
Well, you want to fill it up with, I do it in the bathtub, and just make sure your bathtub's clean. Because I have a soaking tray down in the basement, but I don't use it. I just use the bathtub. Even for big things like that, I just roll it up. And I'm sorry.
The question was like why you're soaking it.
Oh, so and this is 140-pound paper, so it's fairly thick. I used to stretch, when I used 300-pound paper, I used to stretch it too, because I get them so wet they buckle. So when you stretch it, you're filling it up with water, and it gets bigger, the paper, and then you lay it down. You wait till the shine goes off the page, so it's damp but not shiny, and then you staple it down, and then you have to wait a day till it dries, because it'll dry flat. So when I get this soaking wet in my demo, it will always dry flat. And this is a Homo soap board. Get them at the lumber yard. You have to buy a whole sheet today. When I was in school, my teacher, he would buy them for the whole class, and then we'd pay him $4 or something. Now they're $300 for a sheet of them. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Well, it's inflation, you know. No, but they used to really be $3 or $4 for a sheet. Okay, yes,
So what kind of board is that you
it's
said?
called homosote, HOMOSOTE. You can get them at if you call a lumber yard, they will tell you they have homosote board, and you have to buy them now in 4x8 sheets, and they'll cut them into any size you want. So I have tall, skinny ones like that for the koi painting, and I have one for a 40x60 painting to staple it down on. Because you'll see how wet this is going to be. That's why I have the hair dryer tonight, because I'll have to dry it in between. It's very annoying, but that's what I have to do. Yes.
And then the paper is attached to that board?
I lay it down. So have the board, soak the paper in cold, clean water. I've soaked it up to an hour because I've forgotten about it, and it doesn't seem to hurt it. But I think 10 minutes is probably a long enough time. Take it off. Don't press your thumbs into it because it'll pick up the grease from your fingers, and hold it up and lay it on your board. Wait till the shine goes off the page, and then I staple it down. People used to use like gum tape and tape it down, but my stuff buckles because I get them so wet. Yeah, that it'll buckle. And that's the reason you stretch your paper. Part of the reason is so that it will dry flat again. How many people don't stretch their paper? You don't stretch it? No. Well, the only thing is you lose the beautiful decal, and this is just a pointer. You know, you can't get a good painting off of bad paper, so you should buy the very best rag cotton paper you can not afford. When I used to teach, I used to make the kids buy a sheet of Arches for 140-pound cold paper. They could cut it into quarters. That would be four paintings, and I used to equate it to a meal at McDonald's, which used to be like $4.95 now, or $9. So I'd have to change my mathematics now. But because you cannot, like if you're using a wood pulp paper in a tablet, just don't even bother. I see nods, so you know what I'm talking about. Can't get a good paper. You can get away with crummy paint, and I get away with crummy brushes, but good paint, good paper is what you want to do when you paint watercolor. You cannot get a good painting off of bad paper. Just can't. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And just so you know, the painting can be right side up facing you. It doesn't need to be turned around.
Oh, I'll spin it around anyway, because
Yeah.
I hardly ever paint from one position. Okay,
Sounds good, thank you. Do you have a question?
I bet you're thinking she never paints.
Joan?
Yes.
Going
Petering.
back to, when you were talking about the, tracing paper,
Uh-huh.
and I like that idea because I usually end up with a mess on my paper.
Right, because you can't draw it perfectly.
But don't you get it, doesn't it, aren't you ending up with it backwards?
No, because I color it on the background, and then I use a pen to draw it on the right side. So it just transfers. I do the ebony pencil on the wrong side of the paper. And then when you
Okay.
turn it,
That's what I was
because I
missing.
am the person
You're-
that puts hands on backwards, but
You're
so you
doing
turn it,
the
and just
ebony pencil on the wrong side.
on the
of
wrong
paper.
side, and then I use a pen. I don't press real hard, but it transfers it. You know, and then I read, and then I draw it with a hard lead pen. There's a lot of meditative steps before actually painting that, and that's a nice thing for your practice, to have that time to think about what you're doing as you're doing it. For me, this is, you have to remember, this is just me, my way, and a non-traditional way of doing watercolor. Any more questions?
Thank you.
All right, so I'll just put those down there and put those down there, and then I'll trip over them. I'm absolutely sure. Okay, so when I go to paint, this is my palette, and it's always the same, and it's always a big mess, but I like it that way. It makes me happy. And I always put the colors in the same way, you know, in the same areas. And I never clean it, hardly ever. Once in, maybe every 10 years or so, I wipe it off. But you can clean up stuff on it. But some people are very organized, and I don't like to use the little tins where you put it in separate, because I know the color. I've practiced a lot, you guys. So I know where the colors are. And that's the palette. And then I use Viva paper towels. This hand doesn't work unless there's a Viva in this hand. And this is probably going to go on the floor too. And I've put out some colors here. Excuse me. Paint colors. I use the best paint, you know, student grade paints. Even if you're a student, spring for the good stuff. Just, you know, this is you and this is your art. So buy the best paint you can buy. And that's Holbein and Winsor Newton. Well, there's another one that I can't remember, but I use mostly a Holbein and Winsor Newton. And you can see I just squirted out a bunch of paint before I started. So I can charge up my brush. So what I'm going to do now, and the reason this works for me is because I'm really fast when I do it. And when you're first starting, if you're going to paint, like, try to do glazes like this, go. Oh, and the other thing is I save all my tubes and I open them up because the stuff is really expensive. Some of the tubes are $18 now. So I just open them up, and you can get a whole other painting out of that, you know, little bit of stuff. And what, do you guys do that too? Yeah, absolutely. Good. See, I don't have to teach you this stuff. So I'm gonna just do, so can you, wait, I can't hold it up to show you. You can see it. Can you see what this is? This is, it's upside down for you. Oh, and there's a border collie here. I have a border collie and a sheep. What was that? So is that the way she is? Is that right? Oh, there she is. Okay. Okay. So she's holding a cat, and I'll talk about the cats a little bit later. So she's holding a cat, and it still has, the figure is very flat to a great extent, but it's got depth within the shapes. So I'm making the figure round by the shading, but if it has a little flat cutout look to it, that's acceptable to me. If just for, I know the virtual people can't see it, don't fall. But I just wanted to show you her. So I started this one. I didn't like her face. She's creepy looking. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, but I didn't like it, so I didn't finish it. And I'm going to show you on this one how I developed her face. And this was Frisket on there. So she's a little similar, but she's got a cat instead of a lamb. So when I paint, I charge up my brush. That means I load it with a lot of color. And You have to be really fast to do this. So if you're doing this, if you're glazing, what you need to do is wet the area first. Wet your whole area and then go in with your colors. Otherwise, you're going to get lines from the paint. Forgot to put ultramarine blue. So I put fresh paint down because it'll go on a lot easier. I won't have to spend time doing that. And the only reason I can do this way with this much paint on the brush is because I'm really fast. So because I've practiced a lot. So I just lay it on. And that is color-wise, that is ultramarine blue. And then I'm going to go to a cobalt, no, not cobalt, cerulean blue. And I'm going to blend that in with the cerulean blue. Okay, what can I? Oh, okay, okay. Thank you. Yeah, just tell me if you can't see, because I can't see what I'm doing here. So, I mean, that's better. Okay, so see how and I'm going to have a hard time talking because this is left brain and right brain. I'm sure you've heard this in every demo you've ever been in, because the two work separately. And see how that didn't make a line because I got in there fast enough. And this looks really easy, but that's just because I'm doing it. Because it's not easy to do a glaze on this big of a area. But I didn't do this when I first started either. No, there used to be lines all over the place, when I was trying to glaze. And then I just start using water to pull it out. But I am going to put some violet in here. Like I said before, I put out fresh paint, wet paint. I'm going to use it, yes. Yeah, because at home I could just let it and go paint someplace else. But for a demo, because nothing will happen. If we waited for this to dry, it would take a long time for it to completely dry. And it has to be completely dry before you go to the next step. But I want to get some blue in there, or excuse me, some violet in there, but I'm pulling this out. So you can see that is a really smooth glaze of color. When I mentioned Wynne Jones at the beginning, and people will paint and expect, you do a couple watercolors and they say, I can't do watercolor. Watercolor just escapes me. Well, that's not true. I'm sorry. Wynne used to say, you got to do 100 paintings, 100 watercolors before, and they could be any size, before you can say, I can't do watercolor. Because I tell you, if you do 100 watercolors, you'll be able to do watercolor. So I'm putting some cobalt violet in there. Yeah, it's cobalt violet. So I used ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, no, cerulean blue. Yeah, cerulean blue. And now I'm adding some cobalt. And it's a pigment color. And all of these are actually pigment colors versus dye colors. I used to only paint with dye colors when I did the red and blue that made other colors. But now I like to paint with those chalky pigment colors, which lay on the surface and they're really temperamental, but I like them. So see how that changed? And now, so that's the third layer of color on here. So I might do 3 more just to get it to where I want it. And actually I can go and paint in here now. I don't have to dry it because this isn't touching. I did leave a little white line around it. You shouldn't leave white edges on stuff. Now I'm just gonna lift that up a little bit. So do you see that color change? Yeah, and you can play with it a little bit when it's wet, but you just have to be careful. And you just have to practice. Practice, practice. It's like the piano, you know, if you've ever played, or any musical instrument. It's practice. And I always would say when I taught with students, the gift is not necessarily the level of innate talent, it's the motivation. I mean, there's innate talent, of course, but some of the kids would work so hard. And adults, I taught a lot of non-traditional students, they're called adults. And the more that's what, yeah, non-traditional students, they were the best because they wanted to be there so much. So I'm going to work on the this area and build this up and go into her face because I wanted to do her face. Maybe I'll just do her face now. It's buckled. It's not severely buckled, but it's buckled. Where's what? Oh, no, because it's going to dry flat. If I would dry this, Jeffrey, it will just dry and be completely flat. That's what stretching it does. Yeah, the stretching it. Yeah, but you know, if you're a loose painter like and doing a landscape, you don't have to stretch it necessarily. You know, I stretch it because I get it so wet. And my teacher, Win Jones, Win used to, I don't know why I'm putting, Win had, he used to paint on board, a lot of like a hot pressed illustration board with real thin layers. So he didn't have to stretch his paper, you know, and it didn't have any texture. It was kind of like a hot press. So let's see. I'm going to just do her face and see if I can build it up some more. So I put some Frisket around the hairline so I didn't have to mess with that. And then,
Yeah, let me.
oh,
move it.
thank you. Thank you. I love that you tell me this. Thank you. Is that, okay. All right. So I'm going to try and get this as dark as I can. And I use some Frisket on the whites of her eyes. They're not really white anymore. They're kind of a pale blue, but and then I'm going to blush her skin up with blush. So this looks fancy and it probably won't show too much that I did very much. So I'm using cobalt, turquoise, phthalo green, and phthalo blue for the shadows. I don't use brown ever for my shadows. I don't believe in brown shadows on the face. So this is all charged up. So, I'm just terrified. So if you weren't fast getting there, that would already be setting up. Oh my God, look at what's happening now. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's just a demonstration, Joan. Just calm down.
And Joan, if you could lean
Oh,
back,
back?
or move the painting so that,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that? Barry, you're going to have to put me in college to learn how to paint for a Zoom. You're going to have to go back to college. I believe in college. I believe in school. Okay. So did you see how dark that was? Because I want this to be real dark and then the background's going to be real light. So I go in and do that a little bit more. And you know, it always dries lighter in watercolor. You have to remember that. And then I'm bleeding it out with clear, clean water. Well, it's not that clean yet. Here, when I'm at home painting, I have 3 buckets of water. There was a guy up in Wisconsin, a professor, and he used to make his students drink their water. Got dirty. Well, this is back in the 1900s, and nobody could do that today. But yes,
So I have another question, Joan.
yeah,
How much is that lifting the paint that's already down as you
it's
douse
not
that?
really lifting it much. No, do
How
you
is
see me
that?
going over that? Do you see that? Can you see that? That pink? It's not really lifting it. It's almost like someone said once I burn it into the paper. So now I'm going to do this is the scary part. Now I'm going to drop in this is cadmium red to give her rosy cheeks. So now that's, no, put in another layer. Oh my, look at that. I'm having a lot of fun tonight. I was really worried that I wasn't gonna, so I was worried that I was just gonna mess everything up, but okay, so I'm gonna put it on the other side too. Now that might make a big mess, but it's okay. It's just a demo painting, right? Okay, so then bleed that out. And then I have to go back into that turquoise because I want it real dark. I decided that ahead of time. Almost like, like you see these photographs with, oh, that's good. Real dark. And the figures real dark, and then there's all this bright behind them. Because there's little lambs behind there.
Excuse us, Joan, what size brush are you using?
Okay, this is my only good brush, and my son got it for me, and it's like a 12 or something, because honestly, this is what I do most of my paintings with. I know these little inexpensive, like $5 brushes, $4. This is a number 4. They last forever. I think they're from India, and I only have this brush because Jeremy bought it for me. So there, that looks okay. You can, like, if I want her nose to be, now I am lifting it off because you ask it, now I'm actually lifting some color off. Can you see that getting lighter? She's got really pink cheeks. She looks like me, like these red cheeks. So, and you can't play with it too much.
And earlier you said something about chalky colors.
Yes,
Could you explain that?
Sure. There's pigment colors and dye colors. And the dye colors are made from organic and inorganic dyes. And the pigment colors come from the earth. So the cadmiums and the pigment colors tend to be more opaque. And they will lift off if you mess with them a lot. But that's turquoise that I use. That's dye color. So it really soaked in. So let me dry her really fast. It won't take long. And then I'll try to paint her eyes. There's that. Oh, no. So that's not too bad. Was that maybe a minute? So do you see the pink that's under there? It wasn't there before on this side. So I'm kind of excited about that because it's got that pink and she's got that kind of green, but it's a shadow. And I like the greens and the purples for the shadows of the skin. If you look at our skin, our shadows are greens and purples, because our veins and our everything's underneath. There's a lot of green in skin. So I'm going to take off that frisket now, and I'm going to put eye makeup on her. So that, when I was in school, that was let's see, you're supposed to do like the lips and the eyes and all that. It's like the dessert. You work from large to small, and now I'll have to get this to where I can see it.
Yeah, and I can move the camera a little bit too, so get it where you want it, and I can move the camera.
Okay. Well, I don't think I can paint her right side up. I paint upside down quite a bit though, but see, I can't get to her. Yeah, I'll paint her upside down. That's okay. But that got quite a bit more dramatic for those of you in the audience. So that's where the building up the layers and layers and layers just come. So, okay, so I made her eyes kind of purple. Oh, wait, okay.
And
There
I
she
can,
is. Right.
if you want to just put it where it works for you, I can move the
Okay.
camera.
All right, this is good here. So again, I've got a fair amount of paint on there. You have to be really fast when you do this because that is going to set up like instantly. There. I'm going to give her raccoon eyes. I wanted her to be real moody. So that's the under her eyes. And then, again, there she is. And so that was the turquoise. And now this is the cobalt violet. And if you get in there real fast, you can smooth it out. And I know that people who paint differently, they have to get in real fast too, for some of the things when they put things down. And that again is the cobalt violet. I use most of my colors straight out of the tube and mix them on the paper. I don't do a lot of mixing. The colors, if you look, they're all pretty separate. I don't do a lot of mixing of colors. And that's a little bit of a different thing. That's how colored pencil is worked too. Individual layers of one color layered one on top of another. That's I think why I enjoy colored pencil. It's so much like watercolor, the way I paint watercolor. So there's that cobalt violet again coming up to bring her eyes up. And then getting into that other area, I have to be real delicate because otherwise it'll come up. And if it starts to come up a little bit, you can always take a little paint on your brush and just dab it in because there is texture in the paper. And then her eyes were violet, but I'm gonna put violet down and then I'm gonna put blue down on them, around them. Because some of that came up with the frisket. And when you use the liquid frisket, it's only as good, it only looks as good as you're able to paint it. Does that make sense? Because it's very unforgiving. So there. And I'm gonna put some lipstick on her. You should be having fun when you paint. You can suffer, but you know, well, we all suffer, right? I mean, we're all suffering, but you should, you know, have some fun and, you know, sometimes if something works out, I get so excited and I'm like, oh my God, I did that. I did that. Because we all suffer. And then I'm going to put a little shadow underneath her lip here with a dip in her. And then really just real gentle, like with just a little water, so that blend that out so it doesn't show a lot. So I mean, the edge doesn't show. And you still see? And then on this side a little bit too. The way I approach the figures is very stylized. I sort of came up with this when I was pretty new at this and have just, they're different. So continued, and the influences have to do with a little bit of Japanese art, the paper, or the prints, the flatness in the prints. That was influence. And there's that turquoise again. Oh no, that's dry enough, I think. Put a pupil in there. If you have any questions.
There are actually quite a few questions about materials.
Oh,
if
sure,
that's,
sure.
it's a good time to take those.
It'd be a good
Do
time.
you
Thank
ever
Barry.
use Daniel Smith watercolor paints?
Actually, I just bought my first tube of that paint. It's a really good paint, really thick, pigment dense, a lot of intensity. Yes, I just started, bought my first tube. Yeah.
Okay.
So
And-
yes, it's a
And
good
can
paint.
you tell us a little bit about the glaze? Does it come in a tube?
The glazing occurs actually on the paper. So that's what it's called when you do thin, transparent layers of color, one on top of another.
Right. I may need a clarification on that question. What about the resist that you use to keep the paper white?
So I use Winsor Newton. It's really expensive now. And don't shake it, only stir. No
Yeah,
shaking, just
and
stir.
can you hold
Oh,
that so
that's
that the
right.
folks at,
Sorry, I just forget.
and you can maybe set it down on its side so
Side.
that they can see
Okay.
the.
So, oh. Okay. So it's Winsor Newton. Watercolor medium, colorless art masking fluid. And it's really strange stuff. It kind of eats itself. So it does. So if you don't close it tightly, it makes a big ball. It sort of absorbs into itself. It's strange stuff. And when you use it, you have to have a dedicated brush. I always put a piece of tape on it, and then you have to, and then you have to use watercolor, either some soap, or if you want to be fancy, you can buy the paint brush cleaner, which was a gift because I use soap. So there's the paintbrush cleaner. And then before you use it, you soap it up. And you have a dedicated brush because it will wreck your brush in 3 minutes. So you have to coat it with soap. Oh yeah, and have a dedicated brush. This is not my dedicated brush, but it's okay. And then the best way to do it is pour a little in your cap and then use it like that. And it only looks as good as you can paint it. So if you can't paint a good line, that's how it will look. However you mess it up, that's how. And then you cannot leave it on for infinity. Can leave it on for a couple months, and don't leave it under a heat vent because it will adhere to your paper and never come off. So it's a little bit tricky. I don't want to scare you on it, but it's a little tricky. And you just learn these things after you use it for a while. Yeah. Yeah.
And how does that differ from the frisket you mentioned earlier?
This is it.
Oh, that is
Yeah,
the frisket.
Yeah,
Okay.
it comes in this lovely gray, which is kind of transparent. It comes in yellow too. So you can see it better on your paper. And that's what I use for the spattering. And the neat thing, and you always have to use it on dry paper. Do not put it on wet paper. It will adhere to the paper, will never come off. Dry paper, and I spatter. And then if I don't like anything, you can just rub it off when it's dry, not when it's wet. There's all these little intricacies. Yes, we need a microphone.
Okay, let me get just a couple of these
Oh, okay.
virtual questions as
All
well.
right.
So while we're talking about materials, do you specifically like Viva paper towels, did you say?
I do. I do. And I'm such an elitist. Yes, the reason that I like I don't use this in my house, I just use them for paint, the reason is because they're so smooth. And you're never going to get a texture from the Viva. So, and a lot of people use paint rags, but these are so absorbent. If I had, I could go like this. If I had a little, and do an advertisement for them. Yeah, I always use them.
And the type of dryer you were using to dry the paper?
Just, well, this is my pink dryer, dyed. So I have to have this yellow ochre dryer. This is just an Andis, any kind of high power dryer. And if you paint loose, you can move the paint around with this too, which is kind of fun. I don't want my paint to move around, but and don't get distracted and not move it, because you'll get a white area and the paint will just go like that. I mean, I love the shaking of the heads because you guys have been there and made these mistakes, right? Yes, that's right.
So I have a question, Joan.
Sure,
Just 2 questions.
sure.
So after you stretch the paper
Mhm,
and it dries on
Mhm.
your board,
mhm.
then you can use that masking?
Yes.
Okay, and then my next question is, have you ever painted on your paper and then used the masking
Mhm.
and then painted again?
That's right. Yeah, because then you'll
Okay.
save the color of whatever, you'll save whatever you wanted, and then you can paint around that to get dark, and it'll give you different shades. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that liquid frisket, it's great when it's great, if you use it the right way. Yeah, Peterine?
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
First of all, what is the pink that you've used for the skin?
Okay. So I used to use, not used to, let me tell you what I use now. I use the cobalt green or a turquoise, something greenish, bluish. You can use Windsor green and Windsor blue to make that color as well. And then I use some alizarin crimson, and then I've been just going wild lately and using this pink color, which is opaque, but it's giving them, it's shell pink, it's by Holbein. And mix with this is a pigment color mixed with the dye colors. It makes for just a really nice color.
And what did you say about the pigment colors?
They are made out of the natural earths, and they, you can move them around on the top of your paper. You can
Because
take them
the
off a
dye
lot easier.
colors?
They go in and are a lot harder to get off.
Yeah,
So I could go in and I could, if I wanted to, I could almost get all this color off, because it's all the pigment colors.
okay.
Yeah.
I have one more question. And okay, you were talking about you can't move the frisket
Right.
once you have heated it. But so you were very careful to remove the frisket before from the whites of the eyes,
Right.
before you heated it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You can run some heat over it, but just don't, keep it over there. That I mentioned like a furnace duct when I first was painting. I put pearls on a woman and I used the liquid frisket and I left it on for like months and it wouldn't come off because I was painting under the heat duct.
Okay.
So you only do these things once.
Right. And can you talk about the difference between tubes versus pan paints?
I always use tube paints because they're more intense. If you're going to be going plein air and painting, and having things be very light, and not too dark, then the tube paint or the pan paints are great. But in my opinion, and I've read different things on this, the pan paints are not as intense because you've got to put so much water on it. When I put my colors out and then they're fresh out of the tube and I just hit them with some water, I get an intensity that you can't get with a pan paint. But if you're working with little areas and outside and painting, natural things, then they're great. That works very well. I wanted to do one more glazing area here and show that flesh tone before I go and the last thing I want to do is paint on that other painting. So I'm going to use that really dark color again. And I got the little brush now, which honestly I do. I know a person who paints big paintings in acrylic, and she uses this little brush for almost all her stuff. I thought that I was the only one that did that, but apparently not. So it's okay. There aren't any rules, and everything I'm telling you tonight, take what you like and leave the rest. If what I'm telling you doesn't apply to what your teachers have taught you, what your practice has taught you by your experimentation, don't take and say, well, Joan said to do it this way, because there are as many ways to do it as there are artists.
Joan, if we can move
Oh,
the painting a little bit.
Thank you. Is that, thank you.
Let's try it in that position.
Yeah, thank you. I forget. Thank you for reminding me. Can you imagine what it must be like to make a movie? I can't imagine. Although they move the cameras all around. So there's that dark glaze there. And then I extended that out. I should have mixed the flesh color up a little ahead of time. I forgot. And I'm going to put a little Naples yellow in it. Oh, there we go. And then try to run that into that turquoise and then bleed that turquoise out a little bit. And this is the transparency that you get with watercolor, the going from the really dark darks to the lights, and that's why watercolors glow. They're just, nothing else is quite like watercolors, just like there's nothing else like oil paint or nothing else like acrylic paint. They all do their own things to get different results. That could soften up a little bit. And I probably won't do another layer on that. I think that's pretty good. And if I do another layer, I think I'll mess it up. So if I finish this painting, I have another painting because they requested that you show a finished painting at the end. It probably won't be this because it probably would take too much time. So the next one I'm going to paint on is the one I will definitely finish, but not this one. I think it's too long. Take me too long. So see how that's just sort of blending out? And then this is something fun here on her shoulder weight. And that I'm just going over because I'm not going to get that any darker right now. But then this is kind of like what I did on her cheek. So this is cadmium red right out of the tube. And shouldn't she have a glow on her shoulder? Yes. Oh, and I don't have a bunch of cats because you think, well, she likes to paint cats. I don't have any cats anymore. I'm out of the cat business, so that's why I'm painting them. I am. I'm not going to go into the sad tragedy of the cats. Not going to have any more cats, but I dearly love them. When you live with a cat, it's like living with a work of a living sculpture. And if you get a good cat, you'll never have a better pet. Not all cats are bad cat. A lot of people have bad experiences with cats, but so I believe as the artist that you have to have a passion and an obsession and something that you just have to keep doing because you can't stay away from it, and that you love when you're painting, you just are so happy and you just love it more than anything else. And you have to just make time for it in your life. And if you're fortunate enough to be retired, then you can finally make that time in your life. And if you want to get really good at it, I think your light has to be the last light to go off at night. So you have to paint longer than anyone else.
Joan, would you mind repeating the colors that you're using for the skin tone?
Sure. So I use the cobalt violet, or I'm sorry, cobalt green, or Windsor green and Windsor blue, and you mix those together and you get kind of a cobalty color. And then I use a little cadmium red in there. And then I'm using, this is new, this shell pink. And this is a Holbein color. It's a pigment color. If you want to make a basic flesh color, you want a red, blue, and a yellow, right? That's your basic, and you can pick any red and any blue and any yellow, but I've started using the cobalt blue or green or turquoise, and then adding the shell pink to it. So I just find it's very vibrant. That's pretty nice. That contrast of that violet and then that. It's going to be a very vibrant painting, even though it's going to be really dark. Yeah. So. So the
Joan,
last,
we have another question here.
sure.
When we look at that painting, do you say, or some of the others that you've shown, are they a months-long process or project, or is it, 6 weeks, or is,
Yeah, I can do a painting in a month, and that's not 40 hours a week working on a particular painting. A painting like this takes maybe 40, 45 hours, but I won't work on it 8 hours a day. I'll work on this, and then maybe I'll work in my sketchbook for an idea for another painting. If I'm the happiest, I work 6 hours to 8 hours a day. That's when I'm really happy. I don't really get to do that usually. I paint more like from 4 to 6 hours a day. But a painting like this, I'd say 40 to 45 hours a day, a day, yes. All that in one day.
Joan,
In a month.
Joan, I zoomed out because someone was asking to see the entire painting.
Oh.
Could we maybe turn it around one more time?
Oh, of course.
And again, what would you say the size is approximately?
It's 22 by 30 sheet of watercolor paper. That's a standard size for an individual piece of paper. And it's they're individual sheets. It's not a roll.
Okay, and can you give us some hints about what you're
Oh.
going to do with her hair?
Oh, well, I usually stripe it out. I do a lot of stripes. So I'll rub off this frisket, and then it will be dark, real dark around on this side and down here. And then you can see right here, the stripes I started some of the stripes. And it'll be all stripes.
Mhm.
And because hair is really hard to do. So I stylize the hair.
Yes. And someone was asking for some clarification on, I'm sorry, I'm backing up the chat here for a second. Adding and using so much water, how are you not getting those blooms and black back runs that are common with you? But I'm sorry, let me just read the question again. Adding and using so much water, how is she not getting blooms or back runs?
Blooms. Oh, because I I blend it out all at the same time. I'm fast. You have to be fast when you work this way. So I layer in the color, and then I hit it with the water and pull that out, and hit it with some more color and pull it out. Because if I painted there real slow and fooled around and then painted down here, then I would get blooms where it would be white in the center and it would have like a lace curtain around it. Yeah, which is good if in watercolor, if you want that. Yeah, it can be very nice, but you have to want it. So I don't want a lace curtain on her skin. So if you go back and look I think I showed that pretty, like, to get this smooth like that. Okay. Also, the other thing is you have to have some paint down first. You cannot just make that happen on white paper. There has to be some paint on it first. So that's why I do the local color.
Okay. And does this painting have tattoos on the woman's arm?
Those are fish. Yes.
Oh.
Those are fish. Yeah, she's going to have fish on her arm. Well, it's it's what I do.
Okay. Any other questions in the in-person audience? Okay.
The last, yeah. Oh, that's so good.
Could you repeat the question
Yes.
for, she asked how you chose watercolor.
How I chose watercolor, because I had a really good teacher and he was the one who taught. And so I was taking oil painting and acrylic, which is better if it's oil painting and acrylic and printmaking. And the teacher that taught me was the watercolor teacher. He taught me and I got better. The oil painting, and the acrylic and the printmaking, I didn't get what I needed. And that professor taught me, and that's what I needed at that particular time. And then because I figured out a style pretty soon, I had success. So I kept doing it.
Joan, you're the second artist that came here to give a demonstration that said the teacher would give us instruction and then just leave the room. I'm like, and this is in college. I'm like, what the heck?
I know.
But I mean, art is just doing and doing and doing and learning what the paint, how the paint moves. and
Sure.
Colors working together, but I agree with you. I mean, it's like, help me
me.
understand.
That was undergrad. And in graduate school, it's fine when they come in and moan and leave. But undergrad, you need a teacher. You need someone to show you and tell you everything they know. I was at a color pencil demonstration recently, and I went up to the teacher, the guy that was giving the demo after, and I said, "You're a fabulous teacher," because he gave us so much in that little bit of time, a 1 hour demonstration. And I had a page of notes in small type or small writing. And he told us so.
You know
Oh,
what, we're gonna
that's
have
the
trouble
sha-
with the glare on the
the
glass.
glass. Oh, that's dramatic.
Or we could put it on the easel perhaps.
Okay, let's put it on the easel. Yeah. So yes, that was made the difference because I was supposed to be a printmaker. Yep. Well, she's kind of low, but that's okay. Oh, here she is. So the last thing that I wanted to show you is this cat. Yeah. And these are, they're kind of, I call them night cats, and they're supposed to feel like a cat rather than look like a cat. I can draw you a picture of a cat. I can paint a cat. I can do a portrait of a cat, but I'm not interested in doing that. I would hire someone else to do some animal portraits for me of my animals. But for the painting of the cats like this, like I call them Night Stalker and Walk on the Wild Side. And I also call them rain cats because those lines going down kind of remind me of Cat in a Rain. And don't ask me what this pink stuff going through the middle is. I just thought it looked cool. So that just sort of happened. So when I do this is what I talked about. I will never be in the movies. So this is what I talked about doing the incising and the tracing. So I use a stencil that I made myself, a cat stencil. And I like this one because I thought I really got some action in that cat moving. And then draw it on. And then I actually used a stencil. And I copied this one kind of specifically for the demonstration. So I'd have something that, it'll be a different painting, but it's real similar to that one.
Joan, maybe could you sit possibly?
Sure.
Would that work for you?
Sure. Next time I'm wearing a hat. Or maybe a hat that says something. just for entertainment value, so you don't have to see the top of my head. So anyway, so this was a stencil of a cat. I've got the stencil and the poster board. I cut it out. I drew it, and then this is actually the grid work here. I've got I don't know, a piece of iron in my house that it was a post for a roof, or excuse me, for a porch. And so I just copied the pattern that was in that and drew that. And then I transfer that onto here. And then I use liquid frisket all on this ironwork because it's so hard to paint around that. So then I take the knitting needle and I just mess it up. I'm going to have to stand up for this. So I did a few this morning, but yeah, before I left today, and just like that. And that's going to divide that cat up into some shapes. So I'm going to have some lines, pretty interesting lines that will develop that you can see on the painting over there. Scoring the paper. And then the same thing with this from the wallpaper in my house. I lay it down and then I press kind of hard and get the design transferred. And then when I paint, this is what I do. I actually thought I was going to finish this whole thing tonight. Not the whole thing, but this whole area. I bet everyone says that, because you think, oh, 2 hours, what am I going to do with 2 hours? And then all of a sudden you're just done. So I'm mixing some ultramarine blue with that cobalt turquoise. And I have used frisket there. So I'm going to go in real heavy. And I frisketed out all of the wrought ironwork. A lot of times on that one, I didn't do it because it was simple. So the person that asked about the glazing and avoiding the blooms, if you watch this, you'll see how I avoid them. So that's going to come down dark like that. And then I'm going to get, this is the cobalt blue. And I'm going to run that into that. See, and then just play with it a little bit. You can't manipulate it too much because it'll get messed up, but you just the right amount of manipulation. And see, there aren't any blooms because I get back in there right away with another. Yeah, yeah. And this is the same, like if you were doing a sky, this would be how you would be doing a sky. You would be wetting it and putting color in and then bleeding it out, probably. And then I just bleed out the color here. Or excuse me, yeah, the color into the white. You know, I haven't used them since I was a student. So, I mean, the calligraphy brushes, right? Or the bamboo. They don't have a lot of stiffness to them. I like to have a brush that has some stiffness to them. Aren't they real soft? Oh, oh, yeah. Oh, just a little bit. I haven't painted with those. And you like them? Okay. What, do you know the name? Oops. Just the. Well, that's what I say a lot of times. It sounds like, yeah. No, but I haven't really used those. I got some sparkling paint that I thought I might put on this, but I don't think it's going to be permanent. That's the only thing. And if you're going to sell your work, you want it to be permanent as it can be. Watercolors will fade if you hang them in the wrong place. And I'm not the glass, UV protected glass is so expensive. Yes.
Was it created with the knitting needle?
Yes, yes, and that's from this. And I'm going to do it right now. What I do with a knitting needle? Doesn't it drive you crazy when you're working? Oh, there it is. When you're working at home and you can't find what, and you just had it in your hand. What is that? So, most of those were already embedded in here, but then when it's wet like this, then I'm just going to go and draw into it. See how that, to like emphasize that circle there. And then that'll be real dark. And then I like to go in and sometimes I make little flowers and things like that, because these are playful paintings. Like that. And then you can layer up any color that you want to in there. So some of these were lines that were there from, like there's the lines, there's a light layer with incised into it. And then other ones, as the painting comes up, I make them up. So this is the painting. I will finish this, I promise, and I will finish it, and then it will show up on the video. Are you a knitter? This is just one of the aluminum ones. And it looks like it's like a 2 or something. I've tried all different ones, and these seem to work the best for me. I've tried the thicker ones, I've tried wood ones, and this little thing seems to work the best because they do this quite a bit. There was one other thing I wanted to show you. I can show you right here real quick. So I call them rain paintings. We've still got 5 minutes. So what I do is I lift off when this paint is really dark like this to make that rain come. Before you leave, look at those that painting, and I take it and I lift up the color, and it's kind of fun when you do it because some of it will be darker than other when you lift off that paint, depending on whether it's going through a line or not. And I'll just do a whole bunch of these wherever I want, just because they're fun, like that, and see how that lifted that up and made that line, and you'll see that over on that painting. Sure. So it's a real heavy color, and you just go in and make a line or whatever shape you wanted. It doesn't, I just do it because that'll continue that down, because I think of them as, I think of it as kind of being straight rain. I don't know why. It's just, you just have these ideas. Yes, just water, and just lift it up. And then you'll see in that painting that some of it is darker than others. And I actually take an ink eraser and one of those pencil things, from not, you I won't know what they are. It's like a pencil that's an eraser. It's got a little brush on the other end. Used to use it on typewriters. Yeah, that's because you can sharpen them in a point, and then I'll lift off center areas of it in there. So that's, look at the painting before you leave and you'll see all those kinds of things. I would just love to do one of these paintings just gigantic. I just think it would just be so much fun to just have this huge cat, So are there any, but painted in that kind of capricious way? Are there any questions?
Joan, there's just 1 or 2 more from our virtual audience, maybe before we close tonight. Someone asks, what's been the most surprising part of your art journey, and what has been most meaningful?
Well, I think just the fact that I've lived long enough to be able to do this at this point in my life. I waited a long time to be a full-time artist. And I was a full-time artist when I was young and in school, because I was in school and I painted all the time and did the art. And then my life changed, and I always kept doing some kind of art, though. I will say that I always had something going artistically wise, but wise. But now at this age and at this point in my life, to be able to do this full time is pretty astounding to me. And I'm happy. It makes me so happy just to be able to do it, and sometimes people buy it. Sometimes people like it. Sometimes you might even get a job, like a commission, even if you don't want the commission, you might get all that stuff. You might get all that stuff, but the only thing you can count on is how you feel when you're doing it, the joy that it gives you. And that's been the most astounding part for me, is just being able to do this at this point in my life full time.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I think we'll end the
Thank
virtual
you.
presentation with that. We did have the privilege of recording this program, and so we will be sending out the link in a follow-up email, hopefully in about a week or so. But thank you so much for joining us
Okay,
tonight.
thank you very much. Thanks. I had a great time.
Take care, everyone.